Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here at Crossroads. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I'm really glad to have you here. We have a full room in this space, and we have a lot of folks online as well to talk about immigration and supporting our immigrant neighbors. Quite the... Oh, you can turn this off.
Okay.
Off. Testing. Okay, now it's back. We don't know. Sometimes this just happens. We don't know. Anyway, so it is a timely issue. It's an important issue, and making sure that we are using our voices to protect ourselves if we are immigrants ourselves, and also our friends and family and neighbors as well. Before I introduce our speaker today, did y'all see my T-shirt? If you can't see it, it says Lutheran Ally. So if you've been following the news and the attacks on Lutheran services and all the things, I need one that says an Episcopal ally also for the attacks on Bishop Buddy. But I was feeling left out. You saw all the T-shirts that were about the Lutheran criminal syndicate and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not Lutheran. And so I emailed the owner of Ray Gun and said, can you make a T-shirt that says Lutheran Ally? And he's like, sure. So if you want this shirt also, you can just go online at Ray Gun. It's only online. I don't think they have it in the store. But you can be a Lutheran Ally also. So anyway, so encourage you to do that. Because you have to have a little bit of fun in today's world, right? Like you have to find somewhere to have a little bit of fun. And find a smile somewhere. So I'm delighted to have again, I think you've spoken at Crossroads like 482 times, I don't know, Erica Johnson, who is our good friend and one of the most involved and knowledgeable people on immigrant issues and working with the immigrant community in our state. She truly is one of the best. And so we are delighted to have her. I won't read her whole bio, but just know that she has worked in this area for a couple of decades because she's old like I am. So I might be a little bit older than her. But we're going to talk about immigration. And I do know that there's also, because I'll probably forget at the end, there is a training tomorrow at Grace United Methodist Church at 10:30. Are you involved in that also? At 10:30, that is a Know Your Rights. And I know there's been a lot in the area as well. But and it's specifically about Know Your Rights for immigrants, but also what communities of faith can and can't do. So that might be of interest to you as well. That's tomorrow at Grace United Methodist Church here in Des Moines at 10:30. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica Johnson. Thanks for being here.
Perfect. Okay. Yes, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. There's a lot of familiar faces here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. I'm going to do, so here's the plan. I think I have about 20 minutes. Just time check, 20 minutes, 25 minutes?
25.
I would imagine that y'all have a lot of questions, so some of which I will not be able to answer, just point blank, because everything is coming fast and furious. I just saw this morning, like before I left my office, I was like, oh, so no more TPS designation for Ukrainians. I hadn't heard that. That's new. See, neither did any of you. They've been paused. So I don't know anything about that. So there's going to be a lot that I won't be able to answer, but you can throw all your questions at me. But so I'm going to talk for about 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to introduce. Yeah.
It's as loud as it can be in the room.
I just need to like have it closer to my face. Hold it. Talking.
That could be awkward.
Probably. I can do awkward. It's okay. So, is that better? All right. So I'm going to 20 minutes roughly, and then questions. I'm going to let people ask a bunch of questions. I've got a handout here to kind of like that lays out what it is we've been up to, what it is that we are going to be up to, and what it is we're asking you to be up to. I also brought merch. which is super fun. But so first I'm going to start by just giving an introduction of myself and who Iowa MMJ is, and then what we're seeing, how we're responding, and then what we need from you in this moment. That's kind of my plan. Sound good? Anything else you want me to like be sure I talk about? I can't see anything online, but I've heard that there's online. Okay, so Iowa MMJ, it stands for Migrant Movement for Justice. We are a relatively new organization. We were launched 5 years ago. During the pandemic, we decided to join two longtime organizations together. Pop quiz, what were they? Justice for Our Neighbors and American Friends Service Committee. So AFSC, American Friends Service Committee, we used to be in that white building over there on the corner, had been in Iowa since the 1930s doing Quaker peace and justice work broadly, started doing immigration work in 1995, offering immigration legal services and doing advocacy and organizing. Justice for Our Neighbors is a Methodist outfit that is on the national level and has started doing immigration legal services in Iowa in 1999. So both organizations have been around forever, long time, not forever, long time, and knew each other, liked each other. We decided to come together. We do two things. So that's our history. We do two things. We do immigration legal services and we do advocacy. And our model, what we mean by advocacy specifically is grassroots community organizing. We have clinics all around the state. We serve people, immigration legal clinics. We go out to Storm Lake, Ottumwa, Des Moines, Marshalltown, Decorah, Cedar Rapids, and newly, Story County. That's a shout out. And maybe that's enough for now. So, is that enough for now? Did I cover everything of who we are? Cool. Okay, so we are 4 weeks in, not quite, but almost 4 weeks in to the new Donald Trump administration. Trump 2.0 is what I've been calling it. And basically, I was just kind of like talking about this the other day, like it just feels like the fire hydrant metaphor, where it's just like everything is gushing all at once. There's no such thing as a drip drop, although a lot of these things are very drip drop-y. So they're very specific. Like what I just mentioned, that TPS for Ukrainians has been paused. Like they're very nitpicky. They're very specific policy changes that make it very clear that Stephen Miller and some of these other policy advisors that Donald Trump had during Trump 1.0 were not idle during the Biden administration, during the 4 years between Trump 1.0 and 2.0. They were sitting there crafting these things, and they learned because last time during Trump 1.0, when they came up with these policy changes and recommendations or executive orders, a lot of them got blocked by the courts. And so they learned how not to do things, and they came up with a new strategy. So it feels like a fire hydrant, and the changes feel very intentional and very well thought out. And it feels like the point is shock and awe. I'm feeling like there's a lot of nodding, like you guys are seeing that all. I'm not saying anything new to anyone. So in the world of immigration then, what that has looked like, I put the changes in terms of immigration law and enforcement priorities in 3 categories. And actually, I'm stealing this from some of our partners from Prairie Lands Freedom Fund. I don't know if folks have heard of them. Super awesome outfit out of Eastern Iowa that works on offering bond payments to get people out of detention. They put in 3 categories. Number 1, expanding detention. Number 2, preventing due process. Not that one's a little tricky because it's like the due process didn't really exist in the immigration system ever. We can talk more about that if you want. And then terrorizing immigrant communities. So those are kind of the 3 broad categories. Expanding detention, preventing due process, and terrorizing immigrant communities. So then the result of all those things is fear and confusion. And that's what we have seen, and I think you've all probably seen too, or heard news reports about. People not going to school, people not going to church, And the rumors, oh my gosh, the rumors about ICE activity specifically, have you all seen those? Have any of you shared those? Don't share those. So if you see something, just real quick, if you see something on Facebook or social media or somewhere, oh, ICE is at the Menards and they're there arresting people, don't share that unless you know that it's verified. And we have a whole toolkit about how to verify postings on social media. The intention is good usually, like we want people to know, we want people to be safe, our community members to be safe. But there's just so many rumors out right now that what it does is just escalate an already really fraught, fearful moment. So that was my public service announcement number 1. Please don't spread rumors. And so that's the fear and confusion, right? So those are sort of the like the ideas that we have in our head, the shock and awe producing feelings and emotions in ourselves, in individuals and families and communities. But then when you get to like the brass tacks, right? So what is actually happening then on the ground? Is ICE active in Iowa? Yes, ICE is active in Iowa. Technically, they were never not active in Iowa. ICE, even under the Biden administration, was still arresting people. They were still active in our state. They still had offices at the federal building. So they've never been inactive in Iowa. But we have seen ICE going after, we call it sort of making targeted arrests. So what that means is that they have somebody, an individual that they know is around that they want to go after. And so they'll go after them. Folks probably heard about ICE being at the courthouse, the Polk County criminal courthouse a couple of weeks ago. So that's an example of that, where ICE shows up because they've got on their radar an individual who's had a run-in with the law, and they go and they arrested them that day. But what we're also hearing about is in addition to that, so they're doing that where they're going after an individual, and then they're like, well, by the way, now that I'm here, what about you guys? Do you have papers? And so we call that sweeps, and sometimes we call it collateral arrests. And so we're hearing less about that, but that's also absolutely happening. I was going to say something else about that.
Is there a clearinghouse where we can report that something happened?
Good question. Yes. Hold on to that. He was just asking if there's a reporting mechanism for ICE activity. And yes, there is. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit more because one of the things that we're hearing in terms of the narrative a lot is that we're only going after the hardened criminals. So to be really clear, what we see happening is that ICE has what's called an alien fugitive list. And so this is a list of individuals that have come across their radar somehow. It's ICE's list. They got a list. A really like a story I've been telling lately that it's a really good example of what this looks like is during the first Trump administration, we had somebody who reached out to us, a high school girl. I can't remember her name. It started with an E. I can't remember her name. High school girl, her dad was picked up on his way to work and taken to Polk County Jail. I think he'd been there for 3 weeks by the time he had his court hearing. But anyway, he was on ICE's fugitive alien list because he had, they lived in Iowa for like 20 years, in Des Moines specifically, for 20 years. She had been born here, the kid had been born here. At some point during those 20 years, her dad's mom, the girl's grandma, had gotten sick in Mexico. And so her dad went back to visit his mom. And then when he tried to come home to Iowa, to Des Moines, his home, he got caught at the border and was held in detention and then deported. And then he came back home to be with his family. And so I can't remember the timeline when that all occurred, but because he was held in detention, because he was stopped at the border and detained, when he crossed that time, he was on ICE's radar. He was on the fugitive alien list. And so ICE, what it seemed like they were doing then, and we think that they're doing again now, is using the lists that are available to them and comparing it to that list that they have. So the DOT vehicle registration, publicly available, what's it called? Polk County inmates online, like that kind of stuff. And they're going after people. They're just comparing lists, overlaying their list with other lists that are available to them. And there is level of departmental list sharing that goes on with law enforcement too. So is that clear? So that's kind of what ICE looks like. There hasn't been large-scale worksite raids in our state since 2018. And then before that in 2008, and before that in 2006. Okay. So I think you can hand out the thing now, Bridget. I only made 140 copies though, and I've heard that there's more than that in the room, so you're gonna have to share if you came with a date. Okay, so while Bridget is passing this out, what this is a document. On one side, it just kind of has Iowa MMJ updates, and on the other side, it has action ideas. And I put it together really quickly this morning, so the formatting's a little weird. I hope that you can read it. So again, we're about 4 weeks in, and I truly believe that Iowa MMJ is uniquely positioned and uniquely equipped to respond in this moment. Our unique model of combining not just direct services, but also working towards changing the systems that cause the need for the direct service in the first place is not how everybody looks, right? It's how some people look, but it's not how everybody looks. And so IOMMJ is unique in that we provide the immigration legal services and we try to change the system that caused the need for the immigration legal services in the first place. The goal is to work ourselves out of a job. I've got 2 new staff that came with me today. I don't know if they heard that, but the goal is to work ourselves out of a job. We hope that IOMMJ doesn't exist in the future. That is our goal. Because we fixed everything, right? And made everything wonderful. So since, so we've had to adjust a lot though. In the last 4 weeks, almost 4 weeks, we have had to adjust a lot. And so in addition to the immigration legal services and the advocacy organizing program, we've had to build a completely new program with essentially the same number of staff, which as I'm sure you can all imagine is great. And we're continuing to do the regular work. So on this document, what you have, some of you have yellow, that's beautiful. What you have in like the orangish yellow, where it says IOMMJ updates, is a list of the things that we have been working on. And then over to the right then is a column of what comes next. So just really quickly to give you an idea, again, these can be broken down in 3 categories. I really like 3s. Outreach, rebuilding resistance mechanisms, and then expanding legal services. With the caveat that another big one is related to our office, because our staff have been expressing to us leading up to the election and after the election that they were afraid for their safety because of the work that we do. We also sued the Attorney General like last summer because the Iowa State Legislature, that's what I was here last year talking about. The Iowa State Legislature passed a horrible anti-immigrant bill at the time. It was the worst anti-immigrant bill that the state has seen. And it was also unconstitutional. And so we, along with our partners at the ACLU and American Immigration Council, sued the state and got that law temporarily blocked. But when you do things like sue the Attorney General in a state that is supremely anti-immigrant, we know that there's a target on our back. We knew that was a risk to take, and we did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. And doing the right thing matters. Now, in the past, and in the future. So, but our staff was like, man, well, there's a lot of violent rhetoric right now. And there's a lot of violent rhetoric specifically about immigrants and people, organizations who support immigrants. And so we actually moved like last week. In addition to all of this other stuff, we moved our office. And so we're in a safer location now. There's a security guard. And so that's something, yeah, super fun. So if you come to our office for signs or anything, we're still in the process of unpacking. Please pardon our mess. So we did that, and we also implemented new emergency protocol and guidance related to ICE. This is kind of some of the same stuff that perhaps you're going to be talking about if you go to the Know Your Rights training at Grace United Methodist tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yes. Just kind of what to do if ICE shows up. And so really going through with our own staff, what their constitutional rights are, what our rights are as an organization, and what we would do if ICE showed up. We've been doing a lot of community meetings and just listening sessions. The whole idea being maybe we just all need to shut up and listen a little bit more to what our community is saying, virtually, in person. And then we started doing a bunch of Know Your Rights and safety planning presentations. So the Know Your Rights is just the constitutional stuff that protects everybody, regardless of immigration status in this country. And the safety planning is the stuff that we do, that families do in the event of usually in the event of a death. But in this case, if you're at risk for deportation, you're doing it in the event of your arrest and deportation, separation from your family. So we've been doing those in partnership with the schools and other groups. And then we've also been doing train the trainer, because there's not enough of us to be able to do all the Know Your Rights trainings, which is great, because then other individuals can go out and give the constitutional information, like what's happening on Saturday, tomorrow, at Gracie United Methodist Church. Yay, thanks Tom Rendon and others. On that, I wanted to kind of say, like, maybe folks have seen that the person who's now in charge of ICE doesn't like that organizations are doing Know Your Rights presentations. What did he call them? So I'm talking about Tom Homan. Tom Homan went on the news, and he's the person that's in charge of ICE, and he was like, it's so much harder to arrest people when they know their constitutional rights. Yes. So, and there's been some stuff lately in the news about how certain, mostly elected officials are running around saying, you can't do that. That's aiding and abetting. No, that is informing people of their rights protected by the Constitution of this country, which protects everyone regardless of immigration status. Say it loud, say it proud. Weekly updates, so we used to send barely. We used to barely send monthly updates, and this is like the fire hydrant level, like, changes. And so we started sending weekly updates, weekly email updates, which is an action step. If you're not signed up for those, go sign up for those on our website. And we're sending to over 2,000 folks around the state. Community defense teams. This goes back to why I said earlier that Iowa MMJ is uniquely positioned to respond to this thing in this moment. But it's not just us; it's all of Iowa. You know why? Because we have seen this before. We Iowans saw what happened in Marshalltown in 2006 when ICE raided the Swift meat processing plant there. We saw it in 2008 when ICE, it was like 400 people. In Postville. You folks know Postville? Yeah. Helicopters in Postville arresting 400 people. And then in Mount Pleasant in 2018. So all of that to say, we are building what we call community defense teams around the state. We've got a good solid one in Polk County, we've got a good solid one in Marshall County, and we're working on other places around the state, because we know, based on those experiences, that you need to have a plan in place before something happens. Just like the Red Cross, just like emergency management teams in counties have plans and teams in place in the event of a tornado or fire or whatever. We have plans in place just in case, in the event of the natural disaster, the human-caused, government-caused disaster that is ICE in our communities. Signal groups. We communicate with those teams and volunteers around the state via Signal. We've got a couple of them. Shout out to Katie Dawson with the Methodists, who helped set that up. And legal teams. Immigration legal services in the state are very hard to access and very high in demand. And so we have been working with our partners at the University of Iowa, at Drake, local private firms around the state, not just local, to try to figure out what our strategy would be in the event that people need legal services, like after a large-scale worksite raid. We've done some research to identify, partnered with somebody at Iowa State to identify and do outreach to vulnerable communities, knowing that Trump has said, if you got here sometime in the last 2 years, you got to get out. Knowing that there's some communities that, like Mount Pleasant was, frankly, that had seen a demographic shift in the population in the last 10 to 15 years, and those communities were struggling. with racism, with discrimination, with prejudice, with all of those things that happen when communities undergo a demographic change. That makes them particularly vulnerable. We also identified communities where the sheriffs have attended anti-immigrant conferences, and we know that they're going to be the first ones to raise their hand if Trump's like, I need help. Regional and national connections, we've bolstering those. We're part of several regional and national groups. Hiring, I mentioned we were able to hire communication staff, a volunteer membership coordinator, a legal assistant, and organizing staff. Rebuilding our ICE reporting hotline. This is something that existed in the first Trump administration, a line that people could call and report ICE activity if they need help, if someone was detained. We're in the process of relaunching that still. And then expanding our legal clinics. So we've been doing expanded, like how many, I think we did around 50 TPS, temporary protective status renewals last weekend. We've been doing expanded advice and counsel clinics and refugee adjustment clinics, because these are all programs that we anticipate are going to be or have been paused. All right, I need a nap. That was a lot. So then the question becomes, what comes next? And so that's the other side. If you all happen to be experts in like nonprofit businesses, like laws and stuff, we could use a lawyer. Not because we need one right now, but again, we know that there's a target on our backs. And so we have been actively trying to get someone who could provide us counsel in the event that someone comes after us. Squeaky clean, I promise. Financial audits every year. We follow our bylaws and all of that. Everything is golden. But we are hoping for the best while we prepare for the worst. So that's a need we have. That's one of the things that comes next. We know we got to continue doing outreach to schools, social service providers, and churches, supporting with this idea of knowing your rights and safety planning and train the trainer, in addition to the outreach that we're doing to our own communities. So that's specifically immigrant and refugee communities around the state with that same know your rights, safety planning information, because it's working. Continuing to work with partners to develop powers of attorney materials. The last email I sent last week, I think, had the property and financial power of attorney form. We've been needing to update these things. That they're really important documents in the event that somebody gets detained and deported and they're no longer around to make decisions about their finances and their property and their children. So they need to be as airtight as things can be. So we got the finance version one, but we still don't have the guardianship, like power of attorney for your kid one. So that's another need that we're working on. Training public defenders on immigration. That's something that we're seeing right now. ICE is showing up at courthouses, so we're trying to figure out how we can really help public defenders understand the complexities of what's called crimmigration, the intersection of criminal law and immigration. Launching the hotline, producing regular reports on ICE activity and patterns in Iowa, building community defense teams in vulnerable communities, continuing legal services. The rest is all continuing. Continuing legal services, continuing a grassroots organizing campaign, including fights against wage theft and state policy, continuing leadership development, continuing narrative change, and continuing our state coalition coordination. So those last things I say continuing because they're part of our regular programming. I just realized I forgot a whole section of like events on here. So, oops. All right, so flipping to the back then, I think. How are we doing on time? Sweet. So this is sort of the portion where it's like, okay, what do we need from allies in this moment? There's a lot of allies in this room. Allies, that's the word we use for people who don't have the lived experience of migration. That's me. I don't personally have the lived experience of migration. It's not to say that my ancestors didn't migrate here and move to Iowa several generations ago, but I don't personally carry that identity. Okay, so policy advocacy. We're going to start at the top with policy advocacy. Have you guys all seen that thing? Probably, where you're supposed to make 6 calls a day to your members of Congress. Is anyone doing that? Yes. Marty's like, yes, I'm doing it. Good job. So that's just a plug. So you should be calling the local offices and the DC offices of your senator and your representative, senators and your representative, as often as possible. Some say daily. So people, that's scary. I get it, or it can be scary. And I would challenge you to get over it. Like, please get over it. It's not worth, like, the thing that we're risking if we don't do that, it's not worth it. Like, get over your fear. Because you don't need to be afraid, because you don't need to be a policy expert to call your member of Congress. Number one, immigration policy experts are few and far between. And it's all a mess anyway. So you don't, and you're not going to be calling and going toe to toe with somebody who's writing U.S. immigration policy. You're going to be calling and talking to like the 12-year-old intern who's answering the phone. And you should be nice to them, but do not be afraid of them. And really all that you need to say, I put on here, just let them know that you're not in support of the actions being taken by Congress and or Trump. You can be as specific as you want. If you want to get involved, if you want to talk about the reconciliation package, that they were up until like 3 a.m. discussing last night, be my guest. I don't want to. But you can be general and call them and be like, I went to this thing at lunch today and I heard this lady talk and she's really mad about immigration. She seems really busy. So could you make her life easier? Okay, maybe not that, but you can be as, my point is you can be as general or specific as you want. You don't have to get into the details. Not least of which because you're probably going to be talking to like the 20-year-old intern who's answering the phone. And so just tell them, I don't like this. Please tell Senator Grassley or Ernst or whatever that I don't like it. Okay, so the second thing, so that's on the federal level. So moving to the state level, I need you to call your legislators. Even if they're on board and you know they're on board, especially if you know they're not on board, and let them know that, again, you can be as specific or general as you want. It's suffice to say, I would like you to only support legislation that makes Iowa more welcoming and inclusive. Or, you know, conversely, please don't support legislation. Because what we're looking at this legislative session is exclusively legislation that makes Iowa less welcoming and less inclusive for immigrants and refugees and lots of other people. Iowa's not a very welcoming place right now. And I would, if you wouldn't mind, make a special request that you all get on the phone with Representative Holt and Representative Wheeler, even if they're not your legislators. Can you please call them? And I'm asking you guys specifically because this is a group of people of faith. And the things coming out of their mouths are ridiculous. So I'm trying to like parse out what Wheeler said yesterday and what he said 2 weeks ago. And the gist of it is the same, although the words might have been different. Was anybody there yesterday in the subcommittee meeting? What did he say? Do you remember?
There was a person who was a Quaker and talked about Jesus and Mary and Joseph as being immigrants. He said, no, that's not true. We're never immigrants.
Okay, so that person was my dad. Dr. Tom Palmer was, he's a Quaker pastor for 30 years. He's now retired. He was talking about, he was telling Representative Wheeler that the story of Mary and Joseph was actually an immigration story. And Skylar Wheeler said, nah, that's not true. Basically, again, I'm paraphrasing.
He said that's been debunked.
What?
He said that's been debunked.
That's been debunked. Another time, so that was yesterday in a subcommittee meeting where we're talking about a bill that would deputize local police to act as ICE agents, 287G. 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about a bill that would make the act of transporting somebody who's undocumented, an act of smuggling, Skylar Wheeler said to Tom Chapman, who lots of folks in the room know, Tom Chapman is a lobbyist for the Iowa Catholic Conference, and he got up and he was like, hey, this is a bad idea. Like, we're called to love our neighbors and help those in need, blah, 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 quoting scripture. And Skylar Wheeler, you were there for that one, weren't you? He was like, he said, you know, Tom, I respect you a lot, but I gotta say, whenever anybody gets up here and quotes scripture at me as a reason why we should help immigrants, I just gotta roll my eyes because nowhere in the scripture does it say that we need to help illegals. His words, not mine. We don't use that word. So when I'm asking this room specifically, the people in this room or online, to call Holt and Wheeler, that's why, is because they have convinced themselves that we choose when we shout.
It's because I turned this on.
Connie broke it.
I know.
Are you trying to tell me to wrap it up?
Yes.
I could kind of get going on Skylar Wheeler and Rivers and Holt. That's true. Anyway, call them, please. Okay, and then donate time and money. Donate time with MJ and join as a member. Sign up to volunteer. Jocelyn's over here. Yay, talk to Jocelyn if you want to volunteer. Get a yard sign. These things are $20. I have a QR code. If you want to scan, you can pay for those online. I like to say, I've been saying this a lot. This is literally the least you can do. Buying a yard sign and putting a yard sign in your yard is literally the least you can do right now in this moment to support immigrants and refugees. Join or build a local team. The community defense teams outside of Polk County and Marshall County, we could use help with those. If you know anybody around the state, let me know. And then also, do y'all remember the Iowa Sanctuary Network? Some of you, that was our jam in 2017 through 20, whatever. Anyway, there's movement, there's an energy around faith community leaders around the state to do things. Y'all have been doing things already, I know that, but what do you think about relaunching the Iowa Sanctuary Network? Wanted to throw that out to this group specifically. And then policy updates and resources. Again, please just sign up for the emails. We put a lot of stuff in there. Weekly updates about what the executive orders have been that week. Political updates like this reconciliation stuff went on last night as it relates to lots of different things. Community bulletins, what we're seeing specifically in Iowa and how that should change our behavior, what we're doing. Upcoming events, other resources. Attend our First Fridays. Every first Friday, we're doing just updates related to all of this stuff right now. Follow us on social media. And then one question I was assuming people would have was about like, where do we stand with all the lawsuits that are have been filed? So there's a website there. I don't have the answer to that question, but they do. So just go look there. And then there's all the places to follow us on socials and not our physical address because we moved. All right, I think that's all I've got.
So you can.
Got it.
All right, if you have questions, you raise your hand and I bring the microphone to you. Catch my eye ahead of time and I will know who to go to next. And I try and keep that in order, but sometimes I mess that up, so.
So the language that's being used is the worst of the worst are being picked up. And that's the national. So if you have conversations with people saying, oh, no, someone who is undocumented or is not one of the drug kingpins or something, they're not being picked up. Do we know that that is true or not true? And then the second piece is it kind of a twist of language. So as Representative Holt said yesterday, if you are here and undocumented and haven't gone through the process, you are a criminal. So how do we talk about that with folks?
Oh, narrative. I have lots of ideas and thoughts about narrative too. Does that still live on YouTube? I did a presentation like a year ago on narrative change.
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
So the narrative, yes, is that, at least in part, we have to fix this broken immigration system. And the reason why we should do mass deportations is because we're going after the criminals. And there's so many criminals and our borders are open and there's so many criminals. Oh, I just repeated all that nasty stuff, which is like maybe lesson one about narrative change. Don't repeat the myths. So number one, there's all kinds of data to show that immigrants are less likely than their native-born counterparts to be committing crimes. So the idea that's being peddled is false, that there's more criminals who are undocumented And so therefore we have to go after those folks. And so then your question specifically is that actually what we're seeing? That's not necessarily what we're seeing. Again, like we're seeing people who have been caught up in these intersecting unjust systems of the criminal justice system and the immigration system. Absolutely. We're seeing people who, the story I shared earlier was from Trump 1.0, but that was a person who had lived in Iowa and went to see his dying mom and came back home and got picked up. I don't have any reason to believe, because I take Trump at his word. Some people don't. I absolutely take Trump at his word on immigration, especially. And so from what we're seeing, what we have seen in the past, that's not bearing out. So then your second question was about, Holt justifying, saying, and this is what it's all about for Representative Holt and others, is that they fundamentally view the world differently. So I exist in a world where, to me, the future of Iowa is dependent, the potential for a prosperous future is dependent on immigrants and refugees being here. And I know that because I grew up in Henry County and got the heck out as soon as I could, and then came back kicking and screaming. I've lived in Iowa, I'm very happy here. Iowa is my home. But brain drain is a thing, is my point, and it's always been a thing since I was little, and it's still a thing. And so we know that we're older. We know that our rural communities are losing population. It's always been like this, and so we know that the only reason why, even especially our rural communities, are existing and thriving is because of newcomers, because of immigrants and refugees. That's just a fact. We also know that there's a lot of undocumented folks out there, because we also know that the U.S. immigration system is broken, and it has been broken, and Congress has refused to fix it. So when Representative Holt says that he's introducing a bill because he wants to protect people who are being trafficked, that's not really what it's about. Or when he introduces a bill because he wants to allow law enforcement to go after folks, it's not about any of the things that he says. It's not the point. It's the point that he doesn't believe that undocumented people belong here. And it's a fundamental difference of values and ideologies about the world and the way it should work. And for him, I would love to get coffee with him. I don't know. I don't know. But I just wonder, okay, so let's play this out. What does your town, Denison, look like if you deport all of the undocumented immigrants? What does this look like in Eagle Grove? What does this look like in Ottumwa? What does this look like in Des Moines? What happens to your school when the kids stop showing up because they're afraid or their parents have been deported and they've been deported? Your rural schools close. That's what happens. And then what happens? So also, not so. So that's just sort of where we're starting from in terms of worldview, and it's just a plain old difference of opinion of whether undocumented folks belong or not, and the problems associated with that, the solutions associated. His is to deport everyone. Mine is to fix the stupid immigration system that's been out of date for decades and is not in line with our economic realities or our needs as communities. And then the question, I can't help but just note the hypocrisy of someone sitting at a subcommittee meeting and saying the mere presence of being in this country without proper documentation is a criminal act, while also supporting a felon who is president. While also, there's more, while also supporting a governor who has how many DUIs? So it's a fundamental difference of opinion and approach to how we solve a problem that is a real problem, and it's a lot of hypocrisy.
Online question.
Hold on. Okay, got it.
We have one person asking, has a question about the issues of public and non-public parts of a church and the differences of how law enforcement can gain access to either. Do you have any words of wisdom on that?
I haven't done my I'm not a lawyer disclaimer yet. I'm not a lawyer. Play one on TV sometimes. I'm not a lawyer, and churches, when they're thinking this through, should go through the process of talking to their legal counsel about what this looks like. But we do have some guidance that's put together, and also we do have some guidance that's been put together that we've been sharing about how service providers, nonprofits, schools. I'm waiting for some materials from Church World Service on churches that we can share broadly. But I'll give you an example. In our office, we have clearly marked off areas that are not the waiting room and the general entrance area as private, authorized employees only. And we have designated a plan where some of us in leadership at the organization really know how to recognize the difference between an ICE administrative warrant and a court judicially verified warrant or subpoena. So that's how we're doing it. And we have some materials that provide guidance on how others can do it. And I would encourage you to have conversations with leadership in your congregation, in your parish, in your organization to figure out what steps you need to be taking.
Over here, Erica.
Hold on.
If a person, if a person would enroll to volunteer, what might we be doing?
What do you want to do? Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's funny because it's true. We have people who coordinate our legal clinics, who are who give 10 hours a month or 20 hours a month and help us do these big heavy lifts, and they coordinate local volunteers to come and help us do our legal clinics. We have people who do data entry. So it's I go to an event and I have a sign-in sheet. Totally forgot to bring a sign-in sheet. And we get hundreds of names, and we need to put them in our system in order to track how we're doing with that, engaging our community members. People who come in and do filing for us. So there's everything from heavy lifts to light lifts, data stuff. We're also looking, if anybody's bilingual, we're looking for bilingual volunteers to help on our hotline right now, our ICE reporting hotline. And we do training and all that kind of stuff. Another plug I'll say right now is for rapid response volunteers. So we need people who, if we have somebody calls the ICE reporting hotline and they're ICE is at Walmart or Menards or whatever. We're okay, how do you know that? And I saw something on Facebook. Well, when was that? I don't know, an hour ago. Okay, well, we can send somebody to verify that. And so then we would dispatch a team of what we call rapid response volunteers who've been trained in ICE observation techniques to go see if that's true so that we could reflect that back out to the community.
If an immigrant came into this country, let's say December of 2024, and with permission of the Border Patrol, and was given an opportunity to appear in court, say 2 years from now, say in Omaha, hypothetically, or realistically, is that person legal, illegal, in a gray zone?
Hypothetically, Russ?
No, okay, for real.
I don't know is the answer, because every case is different. But I feel maybe one of the things that I can say is talking about asylum.
Yeah.
So this is another sort of story that's been told to us that the hordes of people coming across the border and they're all entering without permission. A note on the word illegal. I used it earlier. Illegal is a term that we avoid. We use the word undocumented or unauthorized instead. Illegal is a term that has been used to dehumanize folks. And so it's just a narrative and language thing that we tend to stay away from, unless I'm quoting Skylar Wheeler. What's the word? Asylum, sorry. So asylum, a person can seek asylum. Real quick, Immigration 101. Ready? This is an hour-long presentation that my colleagues give. I'm going to give it to you in 5 seconds. There's 4 ways that people can come into the U.S. Blood, sweat, tears, and luck. Blood, family ties, sweat, work, employment visas. Tears, humanitarian programs, they're victims of crime, DACA, things like that. refugees, asylum seekers, and luck is this diversity visa lottery. Those are the 4 ways. So under the category of tiers, humanitarian, you've got refugees, among other things, refugees and asylum seekers. Very similar in that people have to prove that they like qualify, like the protected class kind of stuff. Not the correct terminology, again, not a lawyer. But the main difference is that refugees do that, start that process outside of the country, often in refugee camps, and then they go through like the State Department and their process, and then they come in and they're housed through refugee resettlement agencies and all of that kind of stuff, right? Asylum seekers go through that same process, but they do it inside of the country. So they have by definition crossed the border and they're here probably without permission, and they're saying, hey, I have what's called credible fear of returning to my country, and then the process is figuring out and proving that to the powers that be. So asylum seekers, asylum is a legally allowable way to get into this country, and the first step of that is by entering without permission, crossing a border, and then presenting yourself at some point to an immigration authority.
Erica?
Do you have any data as how many people have been swept up by ICE who are properly documented, but there are errors?
Oh, man. That's a really good question. I don't. Somebody does. I'm trying to think of who. One place I go for data like that is TRAC, T-R-A-C, stands for the Transactional Research Access Clearinghouse. It used to be out of Syracuse University. Now I think they're their own thing. But they've got all kinds of information related to ICE arrests and detention and immigration courts and stuff like that. They regularly file freedom of information requests to ICE and have like a huge database. So I would start there. I don't know. It's a good question. I would start there.
She actually, yes. Okay.
So from what I'm understanding, if they're considered a refugee, they are documented and they are not someone ICE can go after. And if they're crossing the border and they're applying for asylum, are they documented and not people ICE can go after? And what happens to them when they cross the border and they've applied for asylum? What happens to them? Can they go to work?
I was a psychology student in undergrad, and one of my professors, literally every time we asked the question, her response was, "It depends." I feel like I'm manifesting my undergrad psychology professor. It depends. And I'm probably not going to go into it. Like what you're asking for is a real life immigration 101 presentation, because it is so complex and so the ins and outs and the different ways that people could get status. It's a lot more in depth than blood, sweat, tears, and luck, which is why some of my coworkers hate it when I do this. But so that was one part of your question. What's the process essentially? What do they have to do? What can they get? Asylum seekers, what can they get once they have presented and gone through the credible fear? Yes, you can get a work visa at some point. Does that give you permanent status? No. But what you're asking, there's a lot there, and I'm probably not going to be able to answer it. But we could schedule an immigration 101 sometime. And we would like to do that, actually. We want to have an immigration 101 live on our YouTube page, because it's something that people ask us for all the time. But it's like an hour, 45 minutes of content. There was another part of your question, though, about if people are safe from ICE, the assumption being that refugees are safe from ICE arrest and asylum seekers aren't. That feels a little squishy to me, too. That's not true. Because, again, people's statuses change constantly. So the fact of being on refugee status, you're here on a certain type of visa, and then you change to another type of visa. Eventually, the goal and the path being permanent status citizenship if you want, but not everybody does that. So, and it could take like a long time to move from at least one of those steps to another. So, so it's hard to answer that too, but I would say, especially in this moment, nobody is free from ICE persecution, I'll call it. ICE persecution. I don't think I've ever used that before, but it fits. Over here. Sorry.
I'm wondering how all of this is affecting our international students in our colleges and universities. Are they able to go home over break and come back? Do they have to stay here? Are they in danger of being deported?
Do you want me to say it depends? I won't say it depends. I will say, I probably am not gonna be able to answer that either though. I mean, I can partially answer it, but it's not an area of expertise of ours, international student team. I can say that what we have seen and what we helped lift up in the days leading up to Inauguration Day is the advice from institutes of higher education that their international students be in the country on that day. And I can say that we have also heard reports of, like last night, we host quarterly statewide strategy phone calls with advocates from all around the state. And on that call last night, someone was asking a similar question. My international students are fearful, and what is the school doing to protect them? Which is not, too different than what like elementary school teachers are asking. So I think generally speaking, the fear is there, which means I would love to see the administration, the leadership of institutions being more vocal about what they're doing to protect their students. In a moment where, I'm going to riff a little bit because I think it's important, in a moment where we live in a world where institutions are backing away from their values and their principles, it's really important that we remind them that that's not okay and that we still have free speech in this moment in this country. And until somebody takes it away from us, we should be exercising it. So backing away from the things that we value and we identify with as our principles is not something we should be doing. We should be leaning into those things right now and trying to change the trajectory that we're on.
If folks want to sign up to volunteer, if folks want to sign up for your emails, if folks want to support the work that IMMJ is doing, what's your website? Is it on the paper? I don't have a paper, so. But you can point out where it is.
Sorry. Down at the bottom of the gray.
So down at the bottom in the gray, there's all kinds of information there about IMMJ that you can find. I would encourage you to go there and make sure that you sign up to receive all of the things that Erica mentioned before. It's important that we, as she indicated, it's important that we all use our voice and that we not be scared. I will say that I have had several conversations with folks who work in public schools, and sometimes the reason why they are not very public is they're afraid for their kids and don't want to become a target. So I give them a little bit of grace. I don't give corporations any grace. So anyway, help me to thank Erica Johnson. If you are on our email list, hopefully you are because you're here. If you're not, I would encourage you to sign up for our email as well. You hopefully received our legislative update this morning. My apologies for the length, as always. On a related issue, because it's a group of people who have been targeted, the gender identity language that we have been saying for weeks they're going to do, and they have been telling us they're not going to do, very explicitly telling people when you call the governor's office, they actually told some people that we were lying And then yesterday, as they left the building, they dropped a piece of horrible, horrible, horrible legislation. And we are told there will be a subcommittee on Monday. That's to be posted. It hasn't been posted yet, at least before this event. There could be a public hearing also maybe on Thursday. So if Democrats request a public hearing, they have to hold the public hearing. But our understanding is that the public hearing would likely be Thursday morning, maybe Wednesday afternoon, probably Thursday morning, and that they will run the bill in the House Thursday afternoon. Yes, there's a bill number, House Study Bill 242. So it's in the legislative update. There's messaging in that, and I need you to use your voice on that as well. Use your voice on the bill that Erica talked about immigration and ICE. But we really need you to use your voice also on the Gender Identity Erasure Act is what we're calling it. And it's just critically important over the weekend for you to be making your voice heard. To Steve Holt, I don't have Steve Holt's personal cell phone number. I don't know why. I should try and get that. And Skylar Wheeler. But at the bottom of our legislative update is the telephone number for the House. And you can just simply call that and leave a message there, and they get those messages, or you can send an email as well. But all that information is on our legislative update. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you do and for using your voices and for being engaged in these issues. Really, truly appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Thank you.